Welcome to the Weekly Dose, a Pharmacy Times broadcast bringing you the latest clinical updates, regulatory decisions, and expert insights shaping the pharmacy profession. I'm Danielle Valetti, and today I'm joined by Kennedy Ferrugia.
Each week, we break down the top stories impacting pharmacists across specialties, from clinical practice and emerging therapies to regulatory updates and patient care. Let's begin with this week's top story.
This week's top story focuses on a rise in cyclosporiasis cases across the United States. Cyclosporiasis is a gastrointestinal illness caused by the parasite Cyclospora. More than 450 cases have been reported across 18 states, including more than 300 cases in Michigan alone. Although cyclosporiasis is a nationally notifiable disease, the high number of cases has raised concern among public health officials. The CDC has said the true number of cases is likely higher than reported, since some people recover without seeking medical care or are not tested specifically for cyclospora.
As of July 7th, officials have not identified a single multi-state outbreak linking all cases. Cyclosporiasis is most often contracted through food or water contaminated with fecal matter. Symptoms can include stomach cramps, loss of appetite, nausea, vomiting, and severe diarrhea, which is the hallmark symptom. One challenge is that symptoms typically appear around a week after infection, making it difficult to identify the contaminated food source. Past outbreaks have been linked to produce such as basil, cilantro, spinach, berries, snow peas, and lettuce blends.
Diagnosis can also be tricky. A routine stool culture ordered for acute diarrhea will not detect cyclospora. Confirming infection requires a specific test, such as a modified acid-fast stain or PCR assay, that must be requested by name. Treatment typically involves Bactrim and Septra. Left untreated, cyclosporiasis is rarely life-threatening but can last for weeks or more than a month.
For pharmacists, this is an important counseling opportunity. Patients with persistent symptoms, especially those in affected areas, should be encouraged to seek care and ask their provider about cyclosporiasis testing. Prevention also remains key. That includes washing produce thoroughly, practicing hand hygiene, avoiding swallowing water from pools or natural water sources, and being especially careful in preparing food while symptomatic.
Turning now to this week's KOL feature. Pharmacy Times spoke with Aza Allsop, MD, PhD, about what safety monitoring for psychedelic therapies could look like as these treatments move closer to clinical practice. Allsop is an assistant professor of psychiatry at Yale University and Howard University, as well as head of research for Beckley Retreats. The conversation followed President Donald J. Trump's executive order aimed at accelerating the development and regulatory review of psychedelic medicines. Allsop said that as these therapies become more widely available, healthcare professionals will need robust safety systems to ensure they are used appropriately.
One of his biggest takeaways was the potential for a monitoring system similar to the FDA's Risk Evaluation and Mitigation Strategy, or REMS, program. He explained that a REMS-style approach could track when a patient receives a psychedelic treatment, who administered it, and the patient's post-treatment integration period. According to Allsop, that kind of system could help prevent patients from receiving multiple treatments too close together at different centers, a situation that has not been studied in clinical trials and could create safety concerns.
Allsop also discussed the growing investment in psychedelic research from leading institutions, including Stanford, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, and Yale. He said that level of institutional support reflects growing scientific confidence in the field, but emphasized that the excitement must be balanced with a careful, risk-averse approach that maximizes benefit while minimizing harm.
He closed the conversation by highlighting the potential for psychedelic therapies to help address public health challenges, including the mental health crisis, the loneliness epidemic, and increasing social polarization. However, he stressed that as these therapies continue to develop, they must be implemented in a way that is equitable, accessible, and centered on patient safety. For pharmacists, that can mean a growing role in patient counseling, safety monitoring, and ensuring these therapies are used responsibly as they enter mainstream practice.
Turning now to policy news, where this week brought several major FDA actions across nephrology, hematology, cell therapy, and precision medicine. Let's start with a new treatment option for patients living with IgA nephropathy. The FDA has granted accelerated approval to Asacicept VYNJ, marketed as Trutacna, to reduce proteinuria in adults with primary IgA nephropathy who are at risk for disease progression. The therapy is the first to target both BAFF and APRIL, two immune signaling pathways that play a central role in the disease process.
The approval was supported by findings from the Phase 3 Origin trial, where patients receiving Trutacna experienced about a 46% reduction in proteinuria compared with placebo. Although the approval was based on this important surrogate marker, the FDA noted that ongoing studies will continue to evaluate whether the therapy provides long-term preservation of kidney function. For pharmacists, patients counseling will include weekly subcutaneous injection training, infection prevention, and reinforcing that live vaccines should be avoided during treatment.
The FDA has also expanded the approval of Casgevy, making it the first gene therapy approved for children as young as 2 years old with sickle cell disease and recurrent vaso-occlusive crisis or transfusion-dependent beta thalassemia. Casgevy is a one-time CRISPR-based gene therapy that uses a patient's own stem cells to increase fetal hemoglobin production, helping reduce sickling of red blood cells or the need for chronic transfusions. The expanded indication represents an important step towards earlier intervention for young patients living with these serious inherited blood disorders.
The FDA's decision was supported by pediatric clinical data showing that all evaluable children with sickle cell disease remained free of severe vaso-occlusive crisis for at least 12 consecutive months following treatment. For patients with transfusion-dependent beta thalassemia, the majority achieved transfusion independence for at least 1 year. Pharmacists will continue to play a key role in supporting care, medication management, patient education, and coordinating complex cell therapy treatment pathways.
In hematology, the FDA has approved Treg for adults with hematologic malignancies undergoing matched donor hematopoietic stem cell transplantation. The personalized cell therapy is designed to support immune reconstitution while reducing the risk of chronic graft versus host disease, one of the most serious complications following transplant. The approval represents the first FDA-approved therapy to combine regulatory T cells, stem cells, and conventional T cells into a single engineered transplant product.
The decision was backed by results from the Phase 3 Precision T trial, which demonstrated significant improvements in chronic graft versus host disease free survival compared with standard transplant approaches. Patients receiving Treg also experienced fewer serious infections, lower non-relapse mortality, and improved overall quality of life following transplant. For transplant pharmacists, the approval introduces a new precision cell therapy that may help improve long-term outcomes for patients with blood cancers.
And finally, the National Institute of Health has released a major expansion on its All of Us research program, further advancing precision medicine research. The updated database now includes information from more than 747,000 participants, linking whole genome sequencing with electronic health records, laboratory data, survey responses, environmental information, and wearable device data.
One of the program's biggest strengths is its diversity. More than 86% of participants represent communities that have historically been underrepresented in biomedical research, helping scientists develop more representative disease models and better understand how different populations respond to treatment. For pharmacists, the program has major implications for pharmacogenomics, which examines how genetic differences influence medication response, effectiveness, and adverse effects.
Although the data will require additional validation before it changes everyday clinical practice, it represents an important step towards more personalized, equitable, and evidence-based medication management. As precision medicine continues to evolve, pharmacists will remain at the center of helping translate these emerging discoveries into improved patient care.
This week's top stories highlights the wide-ranging role of pharmacists across public health, emerging therapies, infectious disease, and precision medicine.
From rising cyclosporiasis cases and psychedelic therapy monitoring to new FDA approvals and expanded research datasets, pharmacists can continue to play a critical role in patient education, safety, and care coordination. You can read more about today's stories on pharmacytimes.com and be sure to follow us on social media at Pharmacy Times. For Pharmacy Times, I'm Danielle Valetti.
And I'm Kennedy Ferrugia. Thank you for watching the Weekly Dose. We'll see you next week.